What about if the UN didn't have a Security Council or didn't give veto power to the 5 permanent Security Council members? It couldn't happen, because the great powers will not allow any interference with their affairs. Take the United States, which has been by far the leader in vetoing UN Security Council resolutions since the 1970s. If we don't like what the UN is doing, the UN can go down the tubes. We just ignore them, and that ends the matter. It's quite interesting to trace the changes in the U.S. attitude towards the UN over the years. In the late 1940s, the United States just ran it completely. International relations of power were such that the U.S. just gave the orders, and everybody followed, because the rest of the world was smashed up and starving after the Second World War. And at the time, everybody here loved the UN, because it always went along with us. Every way we told countries to vote, they voted. Well, over the years, U.S. power over the UN began to drop, at least relatively speaking. A lot of third world countries entered the UN, especially in the 1960s, as a result of decolonization. So there was a lot more independence, and the UN just got out of control. We couldn't order it around as much anymore. And as that happened, you could just trace the U.S. attitude towards the UN getting more and more negative. The tyranny of the majority. What's the tyranny of the majority? It's what's known as democracy elsewhere, but when we happen to be in the minority, it becomes the tyranny of the majority. And starting around 1970, the United States began vetoing everything that came up. Resolutions on South Africa, on Israel, on disarmament, you pick it. The United States was vetoing it. All of a sudden it turns out that the UN is a total disaster. I'll never forget one article about this in the New York Times Magazine by their UN correspondent, Richard Bernstein. He went through this whole business about how the entire world votes against the United States all the time. What he asked was, why is the world out of step? Literally, what's the matter with the world? It's all out of step. It doesn't understand. What is it with the world? Then he began looking for defects in the world. I'm not exaggerating. That's exactly what it was like. And all of this stuff is done without any self-consciousness. It's just said straight.